really briefly that I know it's cold in here. We've been trying to get the air turned down, so hopefully we'll see if it ends soon. Thank you, Dr. Marsiglia, for that very insightful presentation. I think it's going to feed really well into our discussion now. We're fortunate to have Dr. Luis Torres and Dr. McLean Sampson, who are both assistant professors here at the Graduate College of Social Work. Dr. Sampson's work centers around culturally tailored interventions for women experiencing postpartum depression, and Dr. Torres' work focuses on similarly cultural adaptation and understanding those issues when working with Hispanic families and individuals experiencing co-occurring disorders. So I hand it over to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as Flavio said, thank you for that wonderful presentation. You know, after a plate of rice and beans and sopapillas with honey, all I've been thinking about is hanging a hammock from 2 of those lamps. So, and I'm sure some of us have been thinking the same thing. So we wanted to shake things up and do a little bit different. So we're going to do a little bit of a role play. So I'm going to make some introductory comment, and then we'll take it from there. So cultural adaptation is presented as a necessary action to ponder when considering the adoption of an evidence-based intervention with ethnic and other minority groups. Indeed, Marsiglia and Wood go even further and state that cultural adaptation is a responsibility of the social work practitioner. The paper also pinpoints the central issue at play, the tension between fidelity to the original intervention and the need to increase cultural fit. And we'll return to these points in a moment. But first, we want to role play an all-too-real scenario for you. Dr. Sampson is going to play a junior tenure-earning faculty who is committed to having her work really change the lives of the community she cares about, while at the same time generating enough scholarship to get tenure. Any similarities to real life are purely coincidental. And I'm going to be playing a skeptical agency staff member who's going to have to implement the intervention after my boss has graciously told her, oh sure, we'll work with you, we'll do this. So we're going to demonstrate how the 2 characters might have a discussion based on common roadblocks in community settings, some of which have been touched on in the paper, and the discussion is going to serve as a model of how we might bridge the research to practice gap. So, well, Dr. Sampson, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and what you're trying to do. You know, evidence-based practices sound like a good idea, but I know my clients. I know that a one-size-fits-all intervention is not going to work for them. They're just too diverse. And I went into social work because I believe in helping people in their own context and in their own culture, and every single one of my clients is different. So frankly, and without any disrespect, I don't think it's going to work.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your concerns, Luis. And what I'd first like to say is that we share something in common. We share a commitment to social work values, to uphold people's individual, diverse needs, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, given that, I think cultural adaptation could really serve your program well, because cultural adaptation also really is aligned with social work values as far as meeting the diversity of needs. And I can understand your hesitation, and I will definitely be willing to address any other concerns you have. Usually also what I would bring up at this time is that typically what happens in your agency, I would guess, is that you are pressured to use evidence-informed interventions, because that really helps you to get more funding nowadays. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So most people that we've talked to, can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you miss all of that? No. It wasn't. Okay. So most people that we've talked to who are working at agencies are feeling that pressure to actually use evidence-informed interventions, yet they don't have a lot of resources and a lot of time. So, I'm sorry. And another reason that people may be resistant to that is that sometimes evidence-based interventions get the rap of kind of one shoe fits all, like, right? One size fits all. And it doesn't attend to cultural nuances. But what I'm really talking about is that I will talk with you about what the needs of your population are, and we can actually find an existing intervention that might work with that content area. You know, you were talking about look for the best practices of what works with that. And then we would kind of take a look and see if it actually might work with the subsection population that we work with. So really what I'm talking about is we're going to venture into a collaborative relationship where we just kind of test the waters, see what's out there that's easily adaptable, and see what we need to adapt.
Well, that sounds really, really, really good, but I think you hit it right on the nose when you mentioned time. The bottom line is that I don't have the time and our staff doesn't have the time to take on something new. We have to learn this intervention and then we learn to work with you and your team, and time here is really, really precious.
Yeah, your time is precious, the client's time is precious. I definitely understand. My response to that is that initially this will take an investment of time. However, really what we're finding is that people are getting frustrated with wasting so much time because they'll be told by their funding agency or by their bosses, try this intervention, and you try it and you get started and maybe it's not really working that well, so you drop it and you have to move on to something else. Really what we're talking about is going from the culture ground up. We're going to help build an intervention that really meets the needs of your population. That way it's going to more effectively reach their needs. And also what we find is that the practitioners who are so short on time, but are really valuable assets to your agency, will enjoy doing an intervention that they see is more tailored to meet the population. So you actually end up saving more time and more money in the end. But I can understand, it takes a little bit in the beginning.
Well, how about, I mean, that sounds good, but how about the resources to implement this and then to sustain it? I mean, no offense, Dr. Sampson, but your researchers are renowned for doing drive-by research, you know? You guys come over and it's wonderful what that grant is funded, but the moment the grant runs out, it's like, see ya, you know, and you're gone. And then, you know, it turns out that we did find something good. How do we keep it going?
Yes. Well, again, you know, I like to remind people of our commonality of social work. So really what we're helping to do is to train your agency to implement something that you guys will sustain. So it's not coming from an expert novice situation. It is actually that we're in a collaborative effort. We're going to go into the community, find out what they need, tailor it to what works with your community. We're going to get feedback from them, feedback from your agency. So actually, you guys, your agency ends up having more of an investment in it. And we don't need until it's self-sustaining. You know, we use the empowerment model as far as research.
So and hopefully after a couple of more exchanges like that, the staff person is able to buy in to, you know, what the boss wants them to do. Typically what happens in a lot of these agencies is that these decisions are made between the agency administrator and the university-based researchers, and the staff is told after the fact that you have to do this. So that we want a higher likelihood of that succeeding, those conversations have to start earlier with the staff. Thank you.
Okay. So these questions and answers are an example of how the conversation between the researcher and practitioner might proceed. In reality, the central issue is not fidelity versus cultural fit, but fidelity and cultural fit. And that's really what is on the onus of the researcher to really impart upon the practitioner. You know, we talk about the practitioner's role to use evidence-informed treatments, but that's our role as well. Practitioners will adapt, whether they call it adaptation or not. Intervention developers must acknowledge this and actually start conversations earlier and have continuously with the people who are going to implement their intervention. In other words, just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. People will take interventions and adapt them to meet their own needs at the agency. Moreover, echoing the comments of our keynote speaker, Dr. Rubin, evidence must be viewed along a continuum, not just in terms of RCTs. All definitions of evidence-based practice and all guidelines for selections of evidence-based interventions share in common the emphasis on empirical support, and especially the highest level of empirical support, which is the experiment or RCT, or that is the highest level. However, evidence must be viewed along a continuum, including evidence from personal experience, word of mouth, community-defined evidence, lived experience, evidence. An overemphasis on the gold standard of RCTs leads to lost opportunities to gather additional evidence for interventionists at various levels of hierarchy of evidence.
So lastly, I've been involved with the Lewin Group. We're just wrapping up a 5-year implementation evaluation of the Hispanic Healthy Marriage Initiative, focused on issues of cultural relevance and cultural adaptation. And the central question there has been how did grantees use their knowledge of Hispanic cultural values and beliefs to implement their family strengthening interventions. 9 grantees were selected in 8 states in the West, Southwest, Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. And our experience and findings echoes many of the points that Dr. Marsiglia talked about on the presentation and in the paper. 2 key ones are that practitioners do adapt, often intuitively and without a clear rationale for why they are adapting. Moreover, there's little documentation of these adaptations a priori and no debriefing after the fact to discuss how the adaptation worked. And of course, there are no comparisons between the original and adapted interventions, let alone RCTs. Small community-based providers, especially those working with minority populations, simply don't have the resources to examine these questions empirically. They need us, university-based researchers, tenured or not, and we need that. And the second is that most adaptations are surface adaptations to the content and to the delivery of the intervention or to cognitive and affective issues, and they're meant to increase engagement and cultural resonance, so they don't really go into deep-level adaptations. Practitioners need guidance on when, what, and how to adapt interventions to increase the cultural fit of the intervention while maintaining fidelity to the deep structures of the intervention. Remember, it's not fidelity or cultural fit, but fidelity and cultural fit. Researchers can provide that guidance, and we need practitioners' help to better understand the communities and how these communities receive our interventions. We can't do this without each other, so let's get to work.